So, very good morning to our members joining us today for this introduction to free trade agreement. My name is Jason Lee. I'm the Acting Director for the FTA Education and Outreach Department at SBF and also Deputy Director for International Relations. I started my journey in trade policy at the Ministry of Trade and Industry, where I performed analysis for and negotiated several WTO agreements and bilateral FTAs. So prior to taking on this role at SBF, I was also an in-house consultant for the UK, developed their post-Brexit trade policy and framework for the region. Today's webinar is intended to be a very easy introduction for people who don't have working knowledge of FTAs at all. If you already have worked on FTAs, this will repeat a lot of what you already know. But you're definitely still welcome to stay on if you like some background noise while you clear your emails, or you can use this as a mukbang if you're having an early lunch. So coming back to the agenda, we'll briefly talk about what trade means before going to FTAs. I have with me my colleague Priscilla, who I'm experienced as an FTA user in the private sector. She will share the benefits of FTAs from a company's point of view. Priscilla, do you want to say hi?
Hello, good morning, everyone. Sorry, I was muted just now. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and I'll be managing the flow of events at the back end as well. So I'll end off with why FTAs are relevant now, and where you can find further information after this webinar. So please stay on for that. Before we talk about FTAs, we need to understand it in the broader context of trade. So why do countries trade? First of all, most countries don't have everything they need. Be it the input materials they use to make finished goods, the equipment they use to do so, and sometimes the knowledge or software. Countries also trade so that there is a greater variety of choice and better value or lower prices. Say for instance, the groceries that you buy after showing to NTUC or Giant after PMD makes a speech at 4 p.m. How many different countries do all your groceries come from? Or maybe the electronics that is in your room right now, TV, fans, router, computer, and handphone. Each of them are actually made from parts that are manufactured all over the world. So I think it's hard to imagine a world where we only have access to products from our own country, just the immediate region like ASEAN. And that's the case for most people in modern societies. I think finally countries trade so that they don't need to do everything, but focus on sectors where they make best use of their resources in areas that they're better at doing, whether it's quality, speed, or cost. It's an economic theory they call comparative advantage. For businesses, there are similar reasons as well. For instance, they need materials they can't get locally, or they have better and cheaper options by importing. Other reasons as well, they may want to outsource some non-core business functions, such as website design, simple coding, or call centers, to places where they have the cheaper or more expertise. In which case, they become a trade services customer. They may also want to export their goods or services to new markets, grow their revenue. Studies have shown that companies that export tend to be more stable because of increased diversity in their customers. They're less susceptible to market-specific risks. Right? Companies also invest in locations with lower costs or where the workforce is more efficient or has the technical knowledge. Finally, companies with wider exposure to international markets, international customers or suppliers also tend to be more innovative and drive greater product development because of the flow of ideas. For Singapore specifically, as a small island state with very limited natural resources, we're highly dependent on trade, not only to buy the things that we consume, but also to sell the products and services which provides us the means to buy things in the first place. So we have one of the world's highest trade to GDP ratio. I think at over 320%. In comparison, the US is only 28% and China is only 38%. So this shows their very strong domestic market. So trade is important, but how do FTAs feature in this question? Before I begin, just to get a sense of how fast or slow we should go, can you please let me know how much you already know? So Ivy will flash out three very simple questions on how much you already know about FTAs. So just give me like 10 seconds to answer those three questions before we move on. Yeah. So you see on the screen now, do you know what FTA is? Do you know what the use is, and do you know do you know a few countries we have FTAs with? Hey, I think the numbers are still coming in, so give everyone a few more seconds. Right, and can we see the results? Okay, that's great. It's like close to 80% of you already know what FTA is. Slightly lower number, 67% know what FTAs are for, about even before we begin. And about half, just over half, know of at least 10 countries we have. So I think we're starting off a very good base here. So I think really some of you are just using me as the background noise, maybe. But there's a good number that don't know a lot. So these are some of the very basic stuff I'll look to cover, and a bit more as well on specific uh, areas where you could be interested in. So let's finally start on FTAs. Um, what are FTAs? Are they just lengthy documents that runs to dozens or even over 100 pages? The answer is yes. But beyond that, are they economic tools? Also yes. But they are not a panacea for all trade and investment issues or business problems, but they are important tools for businesses trading and investing across borders. Finally, they are also a legally binding international, which brings me to the next point, that a key feature of FTAs is that they provide certainty in the trading environment for businesses. In the absence of trade agreements like WTO and FTAs, countries can change their policies, increase their custom duties, impose new technical regulations, or even bar foreign firms from operating in certain services sectors um, within short notice. Uh, you know, with an FTA, even before we talk about new market access or trade liberalization, they do lot of commitment so that these countries cannot backpedal on what they allow. But very often, with trade agreements and trade negotiations, we do get new market access and trade liberalization. Or at least that's what our trade negotiators would try to achieve. For goods, this includes cost competitiveness and faster time to market, resulting from lower custom duties, reduced technical barriers, and expedited customs procedures. So for services, market access can mean the number of service suppliers allowed, value of assets, transactions allowed, the number of operating outlets of output that you're allowed to have, the number of people you're allowed to hire, the type of legal entity and foreign capital. and a level playing field for foreign suppliers. This is called national treatment in trade policy lingo. Means could mean things like discriminatory subsidies, discriminatory tax, residency requirements, technology transfer requirements. Finally, for companies which are investing overseas, be it plant or office space, this means that your assets will not be expropriated. That means the foreign government, take your asset and pay you, $1 or however much they like to. There are also certain provisions that allow you to move your in and out. This is not always the case with many countries which have certain restrictions on how much funds you move out. And finally, you have an avenue to seek recourse if your rights are violated. Maybe you invested in building a railway station along a planned railway line, and while you're doing so, the government changed, maybe from 4 letters to 2 or something like that. The railway gets cancelled, and so now whatever you built is no longer used. So how do you go about addressing that? So investor-state dispute mechanism allows companies to actually bring the government to task. Right. So now that we understand what purposes FTAs serve, that is why Singapore has, I think, 25 or 26 FTAs with our major trading partners. I've grouped them in 3 here. The first group we have is ASEAN and ASEAN partners. The ASEAN Trade and Goods Agreement, or ATIGA, very commonly used. So are ASEAN China and UNSFTA, that is the one with both Australia and New Zealand. So the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, is expected to be concluded this year, although we don't know for sure. It was envisioned to bring all of ASEAN's trading partners together to quite mega regional FTA. There are currently doubts over whether India will participate. The economic case for them doing so is not that strong. But Japan and Australia are trying to make sure that India is as a counterweight to China. So we'll have to see what happens at the end of the year. But if you know any better, please drop me an email and I'll buy you a coffee. Okay. So more broadly in Asia and around the region, we have a number of bilateral agreements with quite major trading partners in Asia and Asia Pacific. We can see that second column. Moving beyond, though, US, Singapore, and EU Singapore FTAs are the huge bilateral FTAs. CPTPP, that is Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. Again, 2 letters from 4 after the US pulled out from it, but there are still 11 countries in agreement, with potentially more, like Thailand coming on board. So while we have FTAs with a number of these countries in CPTPP already, except Canada, the advantage of these regional or huge blocks of FTAs are that companies don't have to deal with very different rules, very different set of coverage, sectoral coverage, different levels of market access and tariff commitments among different countries, or which results in what sometimes they call a spaghetti bowl of rules. So you can just access make use of the trade liberalization and benefits of FTA with all 11 countries with just a single agreement. And our feedback is that that has proved to be a lot more convenient for our businesses. Right. So just a bit more on the history. The TPP, which is the precursor of the CPTPP, and RCEP as well, were viewed as potential building blocks for FTA vision. That is the free trade area of Asia Pacific. I personally don't think that's highly likely in the near term, with the ongoing US-China tension. Potentially could the tension is likely to last beyond this administration, with both sides of the aisle in the US increasingly anti-globalization and anti-China. But we have to see how that develops in the long term. So over here, I'm just giving you an overview of the geographical spread of Singapore's FTA partners. You see, cover most of our major trading partners, if not already, and also quite a number of emerging markets as well. Okay. Well, I'll now hand over the time to Priscilla to share a few specifics on how companies can benefit from FTA.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jason, for sharing the fundamentals of FTA. So this is Priscilla. Just a brief intro of myself. I was in trade compliance and export control for the last 8 years. And in the last year or so, I was handling the FTA portions of my for my ex-company. So I hope what I'm sharing here would be useful for you. So without further ado, let's get into the practical benefits of FTAs from a company's perspective. So in most cases, the number one reason for a business to utilize FTA is because of the tariff savings for their exports. So this means that the importer or the customers will enjoy a lower or zero tariff at importations. So companies who source for raw materials from members countries of the FTA can benefit greatly, as regional FTAs allows the accumulations of raw materials when assessing the origin criteria of their products. So this means that not only the companies enjoy preferential treatment at importations for their raw materials, their final goods can also enjoy the same when exported. So for the businesses to enjoy preferential treatment, the goods needs to fulfill the rules of origins, or what we call the ROO. It is a set of criteria that helps determines the origin of the goods and establishes its eligibility for preferential treatment under the FTA. So ROO varies from FTA to FTA. The goods which qualify for one FTA may not qualify for the others. So if you need more information on ROO, it will be shared in the next sessions on 29th of May. So another benefits that a lot of companies can identify with is the simplified custom procedures. For some FTAs, there's an increased efficiency in areas such as release of goods and advanced rulings. So what advanced rulings does is to help facilitate trade and promoting transparencies and consistencies in custom operations, which in turn helps expedite the movement and clearance of the goods. So one example of this is the ASEAN single window. It is the electronic exchange of the FTA certificate of origin under ARTIGA. The purpose is to expedite custom clearance and reduce paperwork. So the use of electronic exchange of data improves efficiencies and compliance, as well as this will reduce the cost of doing business for all parties. So Malaysia, Singapore, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam are already on this platform, and I believe the rest of ASEAN will be coming on board soon. The next, technical regulations and assessments procedures. So the purpose of this is to create non-discriminatory and unnecessary obstacles to trade. Sometimes importing countries maintain non-transparent and often discriminatory standards or testing procedures that may put imported goods at a disadvantage. So these provisions will reinforce transparency obligations in the rulemakings. So for example, there is the ASEAN's Cosmetics Directive, ACD. It is an agreement among ASEAN countries to harmonize the requirements of cosmetics products to reduce technical barriers to trade in ASEAN. The same applies for electronics. Member parties should use only international standards such as the ISO or the IEC, International Electrotechnical Commission's standard, as the basis for these procedures. So they actually provide clarities to the exporters on the requirements when exporting to multiple member countries without the need to test multiple times with different labs and standards. And this in turn will help reduce wastages of time and resources. So being a regular trader who frequently leverage on FTA puts you at an advantage when there's a change in regulations or even when reductions or eliminations of tariff happens. You would have already been a known trader to the importing countries, and when tariff eliminations kicks in, you can actually react to the changes quicker, and goods may not even need to meet the rules of origin. So this actually can put you at a level playing field in the export markets or just makes you more competitive. So let's move on to the next slide. Jason. Okay, so this slide depicts other benefits that FTA brings, and I will cover them briefly because I think some of them has been covered by Jason just now. So if an importing country is a party of the WTO agreement on government procurement, then the framework for the government procurement of this country must align to the international standards and obligations. It is usually based on the principles of fairness, transparency, and value of money kind of things. So government procurements or contracts are usually not open to foreign suppliers unless there is a FTA contract to it. So there has been like enhanced access to government procurement opportunities for FTAs signed with US, EU, and CPTPP, which businesses can leverage on. The next, exporters can look for enhanced intellectual property protections under the FTAs. So this provides greater protections of copyrights and trademarks, as well as provisions of recourse for dispute. Protection of investment, which Jason has mentioned earlier. This provides an avenue for recourse if FTA obligations are breached. Member countries of the FTA is required to ensure that the movement of funds related to a foreign investment can be made freely and without delay in and out of its territory. So as FTA open up new markets and sectors, this would also mean there'll be an increased selling and consumptions of services between borders for new foreign service suppliers. So unlike trade in goods where benefits can be calculated based on tariff savings, FTA can provide a predictable operating environment for the service suppliers. So under ASEAN-China FTA, businesses can seek for greater market access for engineering services, construction services, and sports and recreation services kind of thing, just to name a few. While for EU-US FTA, there's also an improved market access to a wider range of services sectors. There have also been a lot more focus on assisting SME. So CPTPP has pushed for greater transparencies in regulations and requirements for cross-border trading to help SMEs navigate into the CPTPP markets. So additional provisions under ASEAN-China also includes cross-border commerce cooperations that allow Singapore's SMEs to enhance their capabilities. So I would say that SME has not been forgotten, and I believe more discussions will be included in future to help SME to grow. So that's all from my side, and I hope the information I've shared will be useful to you. Handing over to Jason now.
All right, thank you, Priscilla. I hope that gives you a kind of good, very broad but shallow overview of why businesses, why trade companies who engage in trade or investment should care a lot about FTAs. I don't think we have the scope or time to go much to depth of this, but hopefully this is a good kind of first step for you to start thinking about FTAs. I think another topic that we seem to can't escape these days is the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly for us, how businesses are coping with it, the social economic impact that is resulting. So how do how has that changed for FTAs? We talked about how so I mean the current business environment is challenging. I think not only for those of us who are staying back home. Singapore's GDP growth is looking at to be it looked to shrink at close to -4%. The situation is not any better globally. As well, furthermore, this is against the backdrop of already quite volatile trading relationships between the two largest economies and challenges to the rules-based multilateral trading system. So how has this all changed for FTAs? We talked about how they can be used for companies to grow, but they are also relevant during these challenging times when there's hardly any plans to expand. A supply chain webinar we conducted last week showed that many companies which are already importing and exporting want to do so with a larger number of countries so that they can diversify their risk when something happens in one country. For instance, a lockdown that cuts off the suppliers or dries up demand from that market. But first, FTAs are only one tool. Singapore and various other countries are currently working on other arrangements to bring about more certainty and help for businesses. One example is the declaration with New Zealand facilitate trade in essential goods like medicines, medical equipment, and basic food items. So both these agreements are supposed to complement each other in helping to ensure that there is more certainty in the trading environment, particularly in these challenging times where businesses are already struggling with a host of other issues. That being said, I think FTAs and other trade agreements are just tools to address certain issues that businesses face in cross-border trade and investment. There are a host of other issues that these agreements cannot resolve, nor are they meant to. So businesses need to consider the entire, economic case when doing their business planning, of which FTA is a key component, but also far from the only one. Right. So if you haven't, fallen asleep at your computer yet, but you are bored by FTAs too much, and you want to find out more about FTAs, please do check out some of these available resources. FTA website that's run by Enterprise Singapore has text of all Singapore's FTAs. They also do have a very useful and easy to navigate tariff finder to find out custom duties that your exports will face and which agreements will allow you to pay a reduced or pay no custom duties at all. MTI has also have a FTA booklet online as well that gives highlights of key FTAs and how you can and steps on how you can get started to using FTAs and customs as well. If you're exporting and you want to find out more about custom procedures, how to use certain certificates of origin. Finally, just to plug ourselves a bit as well, we provide free one-to-one advisory service. So if you have any questions on FTAs stemming from this webinar or more broadly, please write in to us and we'll respond to you within, I think, 3 days. We do also organize workshops on FTA with speakers from government and private sector experts to teach you really more in depth about FTAs and also hold seminars on specific FTAs. Obviously, that is all on hold now, which is why we are kind of doing this this series of very simple webinars. So next week we will talk a bit more about custom duties, and the week after about how exports can qualify for these exemptions. So if you like today's webinar, please join us again. If you don't, also join us again because it will be a different speaker next week. Right. So I think we've come to the end of it of our presentation. We can all go for quite an early lunch. But before you leave and drive me off your wonderful company, please do give us feedback on how we can improve the next few episodes of this. Ivy, could you poll? But more importantly, as well, I didn't give you a chance to ask any questions. So please do email us if you have any. Also sign up to our mailing list so that you can see more of us and talk more about FTAs trade. I promise you all of our speakers are pretty on me, and you can also unsubscribe if you change your mind at a later date. Thank you all very much for joining us today, for attending this breakfast introduction to FTAs. Very much appreciate your feedback on how we can improve, reflect on it, and maybe cry if we get a red score. But that's it. Thank you very much for your time.